Hey everyone, it's Jerry at the Fledge with Bob and Jeremy for our coding club today. Glad to see everyone out there. And today we're going to talk about agile methodologies and just do an overview of that, spend about 20 minutes and go from there. So what do you think, Bob?
I think that's great.
Yeah. Did you use agile technologies or methodologies?
That stuff was coming in at the end of my illustrious career in IT. I saw a little bit of it, but I started out way back in the Stone Age with Fortran and COBOL and stuff like that, and these huge, waterfall methodologies and stuff like that. And then, after quite a while, and things started changing a little bit, and we got into object-oriented programming and stuff like that. And there was a little bit of that agile stuff coming as I was leaving. So
Yeah.
I'm familiar with it at the edges. Let's put it that way.
I'm glad that you brought up the object-oriented programming because that really enabled Agile to happen.
Yeah.
When it was all one big, 2 billion lines of code or whatever IBM was tracking to make sure they felt valuable. It was hard to do Agile, but object-oriented programming really enabled that.
Yeah.
What about you, Jeremy? You got any experience with Agile?
Oh, yes. When I was working for a local Fortune 500 insurance company, one of the projects I was on was sort of spearheading the agile push in the company. The project was much like putting lipstick on a pig. They still had the mainframe running everything in the background, but they were building a pretty front end that ran on Windows server, and then they filtered all the stuff back in to the mainframe system. So it was one of those things. And so I guess I was curious, Bob, when you started, you said you started in the Stone Age. Did you have punch cards, or were you using chisels and stone tablets back then?
Well, when I first started out, the first job I had was with the state of Michigan with at that time it was called Department of Social Services. And they had a Honeywell mainframe. And the first project I worked on, we had in the back of the office, we had about maybe a half a dozen terminals. And you would sit at your desk and figure out what kind of code you were going to write. And then you would go back and key it in and so on and so forth. The way the state works, if you want to advance, you sort of watch the civil service site. And if you see a job you think you can do that's a step up, that's how you get advanced. So I went from there to the Department of Education, and I went up in pay grade, but I went back in time 20 years, and it was all punch cards, and there was the computer room, and you'd take your deck of cards and you'd put them in a little box out in front of the computer room, and then the computer operator would come out and get them, and then if you didn't have them sorted correctly, you'd get them back and nothing happened, and a little note, and it was quite an education for me.
I used to love, we used to skateboard behind a bank over on the south side by Kendon, and they threw their punch cards in their dumpster, and we dumpster dived for them because we thought they were valuable and we were stealing something really secret. It's fucking awesome. Oops, sorry. Not supposed to swear on Coding Club. That's the other show. So let's jump into Waterfall for a second. So I hope everyone can see this okay. Maybe I'll try to make it a little bit bigger. But here in what Bob was talking about and what Agile kind of, tries to combat is that in the old days, I mean, this is what I was taught in college. So I had a software engineering class at University of Michigan, and we had to write out requirements documents and design documents, and we had this code and then have a test plan and this whole QA methodology. And you would spend months, sometimes years, working on requirements and getting everybody to sign off. And then it would go into a design, and then it would go into the actual coding. And what do you think happened in those months and the years when people were trying to get signatures and approval and fighting over contracts? The requirements changed.
Scope creep.
Right? So, well, yes, definitely scope creep, but also scope changing, right? If technology changed and you were enabled to do more stuff, or the whole business model might have changed and the requirements became obsolete very quickly. Plus, the poor users are sitting there doing everything by hand or whatever they were doing back then and waiting for this project to be done. And these guys, the management, is arguing over different changes to the requirements document and arguing about something that might not even happen in the future. And so these projects would go on forever and ever and ever. And then scope creep, whenever that happened, everyone's going back to the requirements documents, going back to the contracts, arguing about that. And again, the poor users are sitting there saying, we just want something that works. We make something easier for me today. And so this model here that I'm showing on the screen, from the requirements down to the implementation and the maintenance of support, took a very long time, had a lot of change control, had a lot of contracts wrapping around it. And and that's kind of how it had to be. Your program was this big, massive thing that was hard to manage, and changes would have a large impact. And problems, IBM did a study in the late 70s, and they called it the rule of 10. If you find a problem in the requirement document, it might cost you $1 to fix it. In the design document, it's $10. In the development and coding, it's $100. QA and testing, it's $1,000. I think you get but during implementation, $10,000. And once it's out in the field and live and in support, it could cost $100,000 for that $1 change you could have made in the requirements. So this whole process was time consuming, costly, and very rarely accurate. It couldn't predict the future of what might be happening. So Beck, who wrote XP, or Extreme Programming, he wrote the kind of first book about Agile. He was one of the authors of something called the Agile Manifesto. And I think this is important to take a quick look at. And I know it's not technical stuff that you might be expecting from a coding club, but this is something that's important about why we write software in the first place. And it's very user-centric. Even if you're writing software for yourself, you're the user and you want to get using something. You want to make your life or your job easier in some way. So I just want to go through these principles real quick. And starting with the first one, the highest priority is to satisfy the customer. Again, even if it's just yourself, and to do that through early and continuous delivery of valuable software. So, Bob, we talk about a weather vane, and we talk about the particle stuff, and we talk about all these things we want to do in the building. And we took a really small step, right? We got the particle sensor in place. We got that working. We integrated it with the Dutch company so that we could see the data. And we had something very valuable fairly quickly.
Right.
Right?
Yes.
And what we could have done is all the requirements for everything we want in the building. We want this weather station. We want the particulate sensor. We want all the lights to be smart. And you and I would still be arguing. And just imagine what this particulate sensor has done for the Fledge in understanding how COVID flows through the building, or how it potentially could flow. And I just think, small little chunks of value that can make your life easier today is much better than getting it perfect in I don't know how big you think these requirement documents are, Bob. You were talking before.
3-ring binders, 3-inch thick 3-ring binders, multiple of them. One of the most frustrating things for me was a project I worked on, and we had several project managers. And they, at the beginning of the project, they had this whole thing laid out, and how much time it was going to take for different types of things. And they had this model where they'd break it down and like if they were going to build a screen for something to display some information, that was like 80 hours. And so, all of this stuff. And they had this huge Gantt chart, and they put it up on the side of these, cubicles that we worked in. And the project went, and it kept moving and moving and moving and moving and moving. And then 6 months, maybe it could have even been almost a year into the project, we were multiple months, 3 or 4 months behind already. And the thing that bothered me about it is they built this original Gantt chart, and they never changed it. They never looked at things week to week and then updated this thing so that you knew where you were at. And if you don't fall 3 months behind on one day, you fall 10 hours behind in a week, and it all adds up. So yeah, no, it's one thing. I've got a question to ask. Did anybody else ever work prior to Agile? You did. You said you did, Jerry.
Yes, I did.
I did as well, a little bit. We started working with Redshift with those NAT charts, and it was a real big burden to be able to schedule. Like, when you did fall behind, it was even more of a burden because you had to move everything up in that NAT chart, and it was too planned out. It was just too much work to maintain. And Agile, I feel, is a lot faster. You work very small and incrementally.
Yeah,
I worked with a methodology early on, and it's called the Warnier-Orr methodology. And that methodology, even though we were doing waterfall stuff, I thought was pretty good, because you would start with what you intended to deliver, and then you figured out where you'd get the data from. That's a real oversimplification, but it had a lot of nice parts to it that helped you actually deliver something worthwhile. But I'm thinking that in today's age, after the object-oriented came along, it didn't make sense to do it the old way.
Yeah. And I think, this is a good lead in to the second principle, where in that old methodology with the scope creep or the requirements changing, having to update a Gantt charts are the biggest creators of liars in the world. That's all I got to say about that. Project managers get forced to deliver on time. So as soon as you change one date on a Gantt chart and it cascades or waterfalls through and changes all those other dates, then you're compressing testing. You're throwing out the support document. You're just starting to throw out the controls that you have in place for quality. And again, the customer and the end user are getting screwed in the entire process. Right. So in cascading models or waterfall models, you have change control. And that's where the managers go fight about cost and timing and commitments to the customer and all that. And it brings the contracts in. And it's actually change avoidance. It's doing everything possible to make sure you don't change anything. So now the customer, again, needs that change to really function in the future that he's now in, you know, a year after we predicted what his requirements might be. And again, screwing the user. So in Agile, you welcome those changes. It's okay. It's not going to knock you off track because you're being exactly what David said. You're being iterative. You're that quick delivery, and you can stay quick and small and simple. And that's what the rest of this is really going to start talking about, is you want to deliver working functional software very frequently, and not just, you know, wait till the end and hope that it works. But if you can save me 5 minutes today, and then the next release is in, you know, a month or whatever, that's 150 minutes that you saved me in that month. That's a couple of hours of doing something better, more productive, more value add. And you know, so that frequent delivery is a really important part of the Agile methodology or manifesto. And then business people and developers working together throughout the project. You know, is that how you felt in the beginning days, Bob? That you were working with the business people, that the subject matter experts were really involved and helping you out?
Well, on some of the projects I've experienced that there was a pretty good relationship. There were projects that were just complete.
FUBAR.
Yeah, there you go. One in particular was a project I worked on, and the project managers that ran it, that they were in fear of their boss. He was a real jerk. But they would, you know, if you completed something that they had said was going to take 80 hours and you did it in 40, they wouldn't track that. They would save those, you know, sort of off to the side and put them on the other ones that were late, which was stupid, because then in the future they would use the results from this project and feed it in to, you know, calculate the next project. And it was just so frustrating to see that happen.
Yeah,
I managed a couple of projects, and if somebody got something done early, that was it. And if it came in late, that was fine too. But at least we clocked what actually happened, not playing around. Anyway, enough of that.
well, there's a lot of delusion and a lot of misinformation going around in cascading models.
Oh yeah.
And you know, even I'm going to take a side note for a second. A lot of people out there who are watching that are entrepreneurs, you're doing the same thing with your business. You're trying to, you know, predict everything that's going to happen in the future before you even talk to your customer. You don't want to change anything, even if your customer is telling you that's not what I want. And you've seen, you know, this Agile methodology comes out of the Toyota production system, which is now known as lean manufacturing.
Well,
But software development, manufacturing, and entrepreneurialism have all adopted Agile methods in the last 20 years. Got any other comments, David or Jeremy, before I go on to the next one? This next one, okay. This next one's super important for the developers out there. Bob, you know, you're stuck in the middle as a developer, right? And you start to learn what the project manager wants to hear. You start even tricking yourself. I can do that in 10 hours. I don't need 40 hours like I thought. And when you do that, you probably don't feel real empowered and real enabled. You probably feel like I'm just playing this freaking game.
Yeah.
And so building projects around motivated individuals that have the right environment and support and trust them to do the job is so critical. So if you're a manager out there and managing, project manager or whatever, a team of developers, these people are smart. They know what they're doing. Let them do their job. Let them get to where they need to get to. Because if you don't, they're going to take controls out. They're going to take quality out. And pretty soon you're just building a technical debt that's going to come back at you in support. And if you remember, if I can fix it in the requirement phase, it's $1. If I have to fix it in the support phase, it might be $100,000. Getting a bug that takes down a whole banking system could destroy your company. So am I preaching?
Yeah.
Sorry.
But sometimes we need it.
And then a lot of face-to-face meetings. Maybe that doesn't sound so good. They didn't revise this for COVID. But, talking to people, this is face-to-face, I guess, at some point. But it's not emails. It's not documentation. Bob, you can write me an email today, and I can read it, and I think something completely different than what you actually said in the email. Because at the end of the day, there just aren't enough words. And we need to be able to communicate face to face. And that's very important, at least talking and understanding and being honest and open about stuff. And again, the progress isn't about, how many things get checked off the Gantt chart. The progress is about, do you have working software that helps the user do what they're trying to do better? And then sustainable development, keep the pace, keep going. You understand your pace. I'm going to run out of time because I got to be done at 5:25. Continuous attention to technical excellence. Most project managers, they want to be involved. They want to help. They want to do whatever, but let the software guy that knows what he's doing, that knows how to build the software, do his job. And I think that over management can really hurt and create that technical debt that you're going to have later, and technical debt is something that needs to be changed. And you say, we'll just change that later. And you put this in the pile, and pretty soon you got 2 years worth of work in that pile. And the best architectures, requirements, and designs emerge from the self-organized team. And that, that's a big principle of the Fledge, our radical inclusion and our diversity, and letting the team or the group kind of manage what their destiny is, comes up with such better solutions than if I just say, here's the 6 things you guys got to do today. Because they'll think of 20 things they can get done that are way better than the 6 things that I'm saying that they can't even get done. And then regular interviews, teams take a break, they take a breath, and they reflect on what could be better. So that is the Agile method or manifesto. And I'm going to skip again because I've got a little bit of a time constraint here. I'm going to skip down to a diagram that I really like, that instead of having this waterfall method where you build from specifications to design to verify to the software itself to the physical design, don't do that up and down. Do that sideways. Do it all kind of in parallel, and make sure the user's involved the entire time and release things of value. Again, if you can save 100 people 5 minutes every day, that can really add up to productivity in an environment, in a workforce. And delivering something quick that does that and then building on that is a really good way to go. So somebody that hasn't spoken much, anyone, or one of you guys is what I'm trying to say. You want to give us something in conclusion or something like that?
Well, one of the things, and I've probably talked too much already, but I had an example one time. I was being reviewed by my manager, And she asked me why the people I was dealing with liked me so much. And I said, well, I listened to them. All too often, at least back in the day, the people that wrote the software thought they were smarter than the people they were writing it for. So they didn't have to ask them or find out what they wanted. They would tell them
Right.
what they thought they wanted. And I used to go over there and I'd say, what do you need? How do we, and they loved me. So, it's not hard to listen once in a while. I had to practice that.
It's not hard to love you either, Bob.
Oh, good. Thank you.
What about you, David or Jeremy?
I have to say, doing self reviews and stuff as part of a practice in working agilely was really surprising. I thought like we did some very open reviews in the last team I worked with, and we reviewed each other, and the feedback from that was it wasn't as like difficult as I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to be something that was going to like feel really personally attacking or something, and it wasn't. And I was actually able to build myself up and identify what I need to do better, as well as we had some great conversations around how we work together. And I think it's really important on that last note.
Yeah, Agile does build those open and honest conversations, and you find out that people aren't just being dicks to you. Sorry again, the second bad word. But people actually want to help and build up their team and have strong people around them. And if you can trust your teammates and have open and honest conversation, then you really can get a lot of value. And we talked about paired programming before, David, and that helps a lot. That's a methodology that Beck really pushed. You want to comment on that at all?
Oh no, I was just unmuting.
Oh, that's I don't know the cues of social. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm awkward no matter what. What about you, Jeremy? You got anything you want to take us out with?
Sure. So one thing that I took away from working on the last team I was part of is that even with Agile, there are still places where the QA team is going to get put under a crunch because something else didn't happen on time. So while it's an improvement from Waterfall, the QA people, which is where I was at, still get put under an immense amount of pressure to get everything tested so things can release on time. So, it's something that this team didn't really push the idea of the programmers doing their unit testing and getting things tested early so that by the time it got to QA, it should be minor things that are being spotted instead of, show-stopping missing things that, really throw a monkey wrench into the plan. So that's what I wanted to throw in.
I saw a lot of that. One of the principles, again, that Beck really promoted and has been part of Agile a lot is that test first. You write your test and then you write your code to pass the test, which seems weird to people, but it's actually a very good way to do it. And you expand your test if you're going to add new features. And by not doing that, one, you get bugs that happen in the code, but also it sets the QA people up for failure. And if I've got a choice, I've got this code made, I can deliver it right now, but I haven't done QA, and QA is not really, a direct value add is what the project manager's thinking. I can ship it right now. When in doubt, ship it out. And that happens to QA, even in manufacturing, in everything. So very good point, Jeremy. Anything else?
I
Nope.
love that you just said something about TDD, BDD, TDD, test-driven development, and behavioral-driven development. Awesome for helping out QA, but I just wanted to add that. Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
I love it.
So that's our coding club for today. We didn't write any code, but we set some methodologies and some frameworks you might be interested in. And we'll see you next week and we'll demo some stuff, right, David?
Yep.
You got a plan?
Nope.
All right.
I do. I wrote it down in the document.
We're staying agile. We don't know what you need to see until next week.
We don't need
All right.
no stinking documents.
That's right.
No.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for watching Coding Club at the Fledge. We'll see you next Monday, 5 p.m. See ya. Thanks, guys.